something is happening with this storm that nobody expected. In the final hours before impact, the models are showing a shift. And depending on where you live, this could change everything. We've been watching this system for days. We've tracked the moisture plumes stretching all the way from the Pacific. We've monitored the Arctic air diving out of Canada like a freight train with no brakes. And now, right when we thought we had this thing figured out, the atmosphere throws us a curveball. Let me break down exactly what's happening, because this isn't your average winter storm. This is the kind of event that meteorologists talk about for years afterward. We're looking at potential for over a foot of snow in some regions, crippling ice accumulation, exceeding an inch in others, and a cold air mass so brutal that it could shatter records across multiple states. The timing couldn't be worse either. The coldest temperatures arrive right as millions of people could be sitting in the dark without power. So, let's get into the details because the next 72 hours are going to be absolutely wild. First, let's talk about the scope of what we're dealing with here. Pull up any weather map right now and you'll see a sea of pink boxes stretching from the desert southwest all the way to the northeast. Winter storm warnings extend from Roswell, New Mexico to Boston, Massachusetts. That's roughly 200 Bauer mi of territory under the gun for significant winter weather impacts. But here's where it gets really concerning. Those purple shaded areas covering the western Corollas, North Georgia, the Midlands of South Carolina, the Mississippi Delta, Louisiana, and East Texas, those aren't winter storm warnings. Those are ice storm warnings. And when the National Weather Service issues an ice storm warning, they're telling you to prepare for potentially catastrophic conditions. By the way, if you'd like specific weather forecasts for your region or city, please leave them in the comments. I'll answer them individually as time allows. Also, if you like the video and subscribe to my channel, you'd be very grateful. Now, let's move on. We're talking about up to an inch of ice accumulating on surfaces, trees, power lines, roads. Everything gets coated in a shell of frozen destruction. When ice builds up like that, branches snap like twigs. Power lines come down. And here's the terrifying part. The repair crews can't even get to the damage safely until conditions improve. We could be looking at power outages lasting well over a week in the hardest hit areas. Now let me explain why this storm is so powerful. Because understanding the setup helps you understand why meteorologists have been so concerned about this one. The cold air situation right now is intense. If you're in the northern plains, you already know what I'm talking about. It feels absolutely brutal out there. But if you haven't felt it yet in your location, just wait. This Arctic air mass is diving south aggressively. And by the time we reach Monday, we could see single-digit temperatures as far south as the Corollas in Georgia. For context, that's the kind of cold that causes pipes to burst, creates dangerous conditions for anyone without adequate shelter, and makes any power outage potentially life-threatening. At the same time, this frigid air is pouring southward. We've got what meteorologists call a Baja low, a storm system that originated over the Pacific near Mexico's Baja Peninsula. This thing has been pumping moisture into the atmosphere for days. When you look at the water vapor imagery, you can actually see a massive plume of moisture streaming from the Pacific Ocean all the way across to the eastern United States. Think about that for a second. Moisture from the Pacific Ocean is about to collide with Arctic air from Canada right over the central and eastern United States. And if that wasn't enough, the system is also tapping into Gulf of Mexico moisture as it moves east. This is textbook setup for a major winter storm, arguably a perfect storm scenario. So what about this southward shift I mentioned at the beginning? This is where things get really interesting and potentially really important depending on where you live. Over the past day or so, successive model runs have been trending the precipitation shield slightly southward. If you compare the older model runs to the newer ones, you can actually watch the snow line, the sleet line, and the freezing rain boundary all shifting toward the south. The high-pressure system responsible for delivering all that cold air appears to be digging down more aggressively than previously forecast. This suppressive pattern could be excellent news for certain areas that were previously expected to get hammered with freezing rain. Let me explain why this matters. The colder the air at the surface when precipitation arrives, the better chance you have of getting snow or sleet instead of freezing rain. Snow is manageable, sleet is annoying but relatively harmless. Freezing rain is the killer. It's the freezing rain that takes down trees, destroys power infrastructure, and creates roads that become essentially undrivable. So, if you're in Oklahoma City, this southern trend is fantastic news for your snow totals. Instead of a messy mix with significant ice, you're now looking at potentially over a foot of beautiful powdery snow. Little Rock, same story. The further south this system tracks, the higher your chances of staying predominantly frozen precipitation, rather than switching to damaging ice. Dallas-Fort Worth, unfortunately, isn't getting saved by this adjustment. You're still looking at a significant ice event no matter how the trends shake out. But for Nashville, this could be the difference between a manageable winter storm and a disaster. Every mile this system shifts south increases your chances of holding on to snow longer before the transition to ice begins. Let me walk you through the timing now because knowing when to expect impacts is crucial for your preparation. By Friday evening, the western edge of the storm gets cranking. Snow, sleet, and freezing rain begin spreading across Oklahoma with the precipitation shield expanding eastward through the overnight hours. Oklahoma City should see predominantly snow with this updated track. Saturday afternoon brings the storm into the Tennessee Valley region. Nashville starts seeing snow, and if the southern trend holds, you might squeeze out 3 to 5 in before any transition to ice occurs. Meanwhile, the brutal ice continues building across East Texas, North Louisiana, and southern Arkansas. Saturday night is when the Carolinas enter the danger zone. For areas north of Interstate 40 in North Carolina, Greensboro, Danville, southwestern Virginia, even up into Boone and the High Country, expect a quick burst of snow to kick things off. A couple inches could fall rapidly before sleet takes over. Here's some potentially good news for the Charlotte metro area and surrounding communities, including Gastonia, Canopolis, Statesville, Mooresville, Huntersville, and Hickory. The trends are pointing toward more sleet than freezing rain for locations roughly north of Interstate 85. Now, sleet still creates terrible travel conditions, arguably worse than freezing rain for driving because it piles up on roadways. But here's the critical difference. Sleet doesn't destroy the power grid the way freezing rain does. Freezing rain is heavy. It coats branches and power lines, and that weight accumulates until things start breaking. Sleet bounces off and piles up on the ground instead of adhering to elevated surfaces. So, while you might be dealing with treacherous roads for a longer period, you're far less likely to lose electricity. For upstate South Carolina and the mountains along the Highway 11 corridor through Pickens, Oconee, and Greenville counties, along with southern North Carolina locations like Hendersonville, Brevard, and Lake Toxaway, the ice concerns remain extremely high. These elevated areas actually sit within what meteorologists call the warm nose, the layer of above freezing air, a loft that melts snowflakes into rain before they reach the surface. At higher elevations, there's less cold air below that warm layer for the precipitation to pass through, meaning less time for rain to refreeze into sleet. The result is more freezing rain and potentially catastrophic ice accumulation. These same mountain communities are still recovering from Hurricane Helen's devastation. Now they're staring down a potentially historic ice storm. The cruelty of that timing is hard to process. By Sunday, the storm reaches full intensity across the eastern seaboard. The Northeast gets hammered with heavy snow, particularly north and west of Interstate 95. The Catskills, Berkers, Western Massachusetts, Northern Connecticut, and the Hudson Valley become ground zero for the biggest snow totals. This region could realistically see 18 to 24 in of accumulation. Philadelphia, Baltimore, and Washington, D.C. get a solid front-end thump of snow, probably 6 to 12 in before warming temperatures aloft introduce mixing with sleet and freezing rain. New York City probably stays mostly snow and sleet, perhaps approaching a foot before any mixing begins. Boston should remain all snow with totals potentially approaching 20 in. Now, let's address the wind situation because this is where the power outage risk really escalates. The European model shows wind gusts approaching 30 mph across ice-affected areas by overnight Saturday into Sunday. Then by Sunday afternoon and evening, we could see gusts near 40 mph, coinciding with peak ice accumulation in the Corollas and up the Appalachian chain. Picture what happens when you load half an inch of ice onto tree branches and power lines, then hit them with 40 mph winds. Branches don't bend, they snap. Power lines don't sway, they come down. The resulting destruction cascades across the grid, and restoration efforts take days or even weeks. This brings me to the most dangerous aspect of this entire event, the timing of the Arctic air. Monday morning, temperatures plunge below freezing across the entire affected region. Tuesday morning brings single digits as far south as the Interstate 85 corridor in the Carolinas. Tuesday afternoon, highs barely climb above freezing anywhere from the Gulf Coast to New England. For anyone who loses power during the storm, these temperatures transform an inconvenience into a genuine emergency. Homes cool rapidly in single-digit weather. Pipes freeze and burst. Vulnerable populations, the elderly, young children, those with medical conditions requiring electricity face serious risks. This isn't your typical southern winter storm where schools close for a couple days. Kids build snowmen, and everyone gets back to normal by midweek. This is more comparable to a hurricane that happens to be frozen. The same widespread infrastructure damage, the same extended power outages, the same potential for dangerous conditions lasting long after the precipitation ends. If you're in the ice zone, please take this seriously. Charge your devices now. Fill your bathtubs with water for flushing toilets if you lose pressure. Gather warm blankets and sleeping bags in one room that you can keep heated with a safe alternative source if needed. Know where your local warming shelters are located. Check on elderly neighbors and family members. If you're getting snow, enjoy it, but still prepare for potential power disruptions. And definitely stay off the roads during the height of the storm. One more thing worth mentioning. This isn't the only system I'm watching. There are indications of another potential storm next weekend that we'll need to monitor closely as the week progresses. The pattern remains active, and this winter isn't done with us yet. Stay safe out there, everyone. The next few days are going to test a lot of communities, but we'll get through it together. Keep your neighbors in your thoughts, especially those who might need extra help when conditions deteriorate. I'll have updates as new data comes in. Take care of yourselves.